Welcome back to another episode of Game Development Beyond the Basics, YouTube's 5,472nd top channel for Unity tutorials. I'm Eric Freeman, and today we'll be taking a look at how to add footstep sounds to your Unity game. Traditionally, advice on adding footsteps in Unity is to add animation events to your animation clips when the foot touches the ground, which will call a method in your script where you can actually play the sound. This works fine for really simple scenarios like 2D games where your walk and run cycles are separate states, but it completely falls apart at the seams when dealing with anything more complicated. For example, here we have a basic third-person character controller and camera system, and you can hear that when just running around, footstep sounds get triggered multiple times in a row. Additionally, when even just standing still, you can occasionally hear a footstep sound. This is because our locomotion is handled with a blend tree, where at any given time, any number of animation clips can be used for the calculation of the output animation. And if an animation clip is at least partially used in the output, even if it's barely perceptible, Unity will still trigger the animation event for that clip. Because our animator uses floats to represent the horizontal and vertical parameters of the blend tree, and because floats have fairly poor precision, these values won't stay fixed at just 0, causing extremely small amounts of the clips around the idle animation to also be used in the blended output, which in turn causes the footstep sounds to play when they shouldn't. Thankfully, this is a fairly simple problem to solve thanks to animation curves. Before getting started, here's the basic setup for the character I'm using in this video. The mesh was a free policewoman model I found online. I have an animator with root motion turned on, and I'm using the built-in character controller component to handle collisions for me. The only scripts that I wrote for the character as of now are this third-person character controller script and the footstep sound player. The third-person controller script is as bare bones as it gets. This camera target script just updates an object I'm using for the Cinemachine virtual camera's aim target, and the footstep sound player is just the listener for that animation event. The general idea is that we're going to create an animation curve called footstep on each of the Locomotion blend tree animations that can be blended together nicely with all of our other Locomotion animations, and every time this curve crosses 0, that means a foot just touched the ground. The first step is to edit the idle animation, add a new animation curve called footstep, and default it to a straight line. That's because when a character is idle, neither foot will be stepping down, so this way it gets blended to near 0 when the character isn't moving. Now we can edit the run forward loop, again adding a new curve called footstep. I found a simple V shape works well, with the start and end set to a value of 1, and the bottom of the V set to -1. Now, let's just scrub through the run forward animation and add a point for exactly when the right foot and left foot touch the ground. This looks pretty good, so I'm going to apply it and then copy it to use as a base for the walk forward animation. Now, same as before, let's just scrub through the walk forward animation and adjust those keyframes to line up with the feet. Now that that's done, we can just hop back to the code, comment out the old footstep sounds logic, and then add an update method. Let's add a reference to our animator component, create a private last footstep float, then in our update method, we can grab the current footstep value, make sure to set last footstep to our footstep at the bottom of the method, and then we can just check if last footstep is greater than 0 and footstep is less than 0, or last footstep is less than 0 and footstep is greater than 0. If so, that means we crossed 0 and should play a footstep sound. Back in Unity, let's make sure our animator has a footstep parameter and then run the game. And look at that, it already works with the walk and run forward animations. There's no double footstep sound playing when blending between them. There's a small issue where it randomly plays a sound when idling, but this is again because of the imprecise float issue. We can see this extremely small number here in the editor, and every time it crosses from positive to negative or negative to positive, it plays the sound. To take care of this, because these numbers are so minuscule, we can just say that if the absolute value of footstep is under some really tiny number like 0.0001, just set it back to 0. Jumping back to the editor, we can see this fixes the issues of playing footstep sounds during the idle animation. Next up, let's look at playing different sounds for different surfaces. I'm going to create a couple boxes for this and scale them to be a nice size to test the surface. I grabbed some textures online for wood and dirt just to test the system, and found some nice footstep sounds on freesound.org that we can use for the various surfaces. Let's create a class called Surface Definition. Inside the script, we can create an enum called Surface Type and provide it a few test surfaces like concrete, wood, and dirt. Finally, we add a surface type variable with the type of that enum we just created. And that's it. Back in the editor, let's add the script to those test surfaces and assign them accordingly. Next up, let's go to our Footstep sound player and create an array of audio clips for each of these surface types. Then, we can add a method called getClipsForSurface, which we call right before finding the random sound to play. This method, by default, returns our default clips array in case the object you're walking on doesn't have a surface definition. Then we recast down from the player's feet and check what we hit. I'm going to add a layer mask variable for what layers this recast should check. Next, we just say that if the raycast hits an object, try to grab the surface definition script from that object. If we get it, then return the correct audio clips array depending on what the surface was. Finally, we can go back to Unity and assign the audio clips to the corresponding array. And we're done. At this point, we just need to go through all the animation clips on the controller and update them to have the footstep curve. While this would be a simple enough process in a project this small, the player's animation controller in my game Samurai Unicorn is absolutely massive, with over 80 states depending on what weapon the player is currently holding, current speed, and if the player is aiming their weapon or not. Future Eric here. While editing this video, I realized how overboard the next part gets, so I'm splitting the video into two. If you just came here to learn about the basic implementation of footstep sounds, then you're set. But feel free to join me in part 2, where we go through building an editor window to generate the footstep curves for all of our animations in bulk.